I just got in a Hubsan Zino recently, but the firmware on mine is really out of date since it's used. In this video, I'll update it and I'll document the process. Now, the Zino firmware upgrade tool consists of multiple files and different software applications for flashing each of the components, from the flight controller to the transmitter, as well as the camera and the gimbal. It all looks really daunting, but I think we could do it. So let's get ready. I've done some brief preparation. So number one, I've got a fully charged Zino battery here. Number two, I've got a fully charged controller. I've got a working USB, micro USB data cable. I know it works. I've got a microSD card, and I've already formatted it to FAT32. It is a 64 gigabyte card, but we're actually going to go ahead and do that live. You can also use a 32 gigabyte card. Either or will work. I've also got this little JST 1.25 millimeter connector jumper for the controller, and we will discuss that as well when we're updating the controller firmware. And finally, I've got my laptop fully charged. Basically, you don't want any of these firmware updates to fail because you've lost power for any reason. So that's kind of why I've charged everything up, just to be on the safe side. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to search for Zino firmware online. It'll take you to Hubsan's website. From there, you can download the firmware, and I've got the firmware sitting here on the desktop in the firmware folder. Now, this is where everything happens. So the first component that we're going to upgrade is the flight controller. We need to go to the Zino upgrade tool. So this is the Zino upgrade tool 1.0. We can open that. So now you can go ahead and plug in the Zino via USB without the battery plugged in. And you should hear an audible beep from Windows that you have plugged it in. And in the corner here of the app, it should say connected. That indicates that we've gotten a downlink from the laptop. Let's look under FC program. This is for the flight controller. I'm going to click open file. Now I put the firmware on the desktop, so I'm going to navigate to desktop, navigate to the firmware folder. This is what we need, Zino FC for flight controller with the version number here. I'm going to click on that. And that should be it. I've got the full file path there. I'm going to click upgrade. And now it's going to start flashing the firmware. We can see a percentage that shows us our progress here. And that's it. It stops at 100% and you're done. That indicates that the upgrade has been completed. I see we've got an error here about the USB device not recognized. It states that it malfunctioned, but I'm not sure why we got that error. So I'm going to go ahead and unplug it now. I'm going to plug it back in, and the computer should recognize it just fine, because now we've got to update the gimbal firmware next. And to do that, we actually have to have the battery plugged in. So I'm going to plug in the battery. I'm going to navigate to the gimbal file now. So to do that, I'm going to go open file. I'm going to go to the desktop again. Go to the firmware folder that we unzipped. Gimbal firmware Zino G version 3.002. Your version number might be different. That is it right there. I'm going to click on that. I think I'm supposed to power on the drone first. Then I'm supposed to plug in the USB cord here. Okay, and now I should be able to click the upgrade button. It does say that we are connected. The Zino's lights are going here, and we should be able to upgrade the gimbal firmware now. So let's try this. And now the upgrade is going through. So make sure for the gimbal upgrade, Zino on before you plug it in via USB. I can hear the gimbal making some movements. Okay, now the gimbal is straight. All right, so we have 100%, and now that it's at 100%, we can safely disconnect the Zino and turn it off. Now we need to update the final component on the Zino itself, and that is the camera firmware. So to do that, we need to get out a microSD card. Now, your SD cards have to be formatted for FAT32 for the Zino to be able to read them. If you've got a 64 gigabyte card, Windows is not going to let you format it FAT32. There is no option in the format menu for FAT32. So how can we format this? Well, Hubsan has an application that they recommend, but I use this app called guiFormat. It's really, really easy to use, and it's free. The link is in the description below. Alright, now we've formatted it, and we're done. There we go. So we've just formatted the 64 gigabyte card to FAT32 with GUI format. Again, really easy to do. And the other option, once again, if you're using a 32 gigabyte card, you just plug that in, click format, and FAT32 is actually available for you. So if you just want to skip having to use any third-party app, pick up a 32 gigabyte or lower card. And this is the part where I'm going to actually deviate slightly from what Hubsan recommends. You can do it if you can do this if you want. This particular firmware update here, Zino IT V0.3.8, the IT part of the firmware is actually the camera portion. Now, and these are the two camera firmware binary files. I do not want to use this version because it, in my opinion, gives an unfavorable update to the camera that drops the bit rate. I want to use an older version, saved here from 0.3.6, and I'm going to copy them to the root. So basically, that's all you're doing. You're just copying the files from the Zino IT folder into the SD card root, and that's it. That's all you're doing. Now, just for safety, I'm going to eject the Zino update USB micro SD card here. I'm going to turn the Zino on. Now, do you see the blinking light in the corner? That indicates that the firmware is flashing. When that light stops blinking, that means the camera firmware portion is done. And that's it. Camera firmware is done. The light just went out. That felt like 15, 20 seconds for that to complete. So now we've got the red light back, and we can power off the Zino. Now we need to pop out the micro SD card, and you don't have to do this now, but I would recommend it. Go ahead and get those firmware files off the card, especially since I'm sure some of you are going to use the card that you intended for video, because next time you plug it in, it would look for them and it would try to do an update. Alright, so now you and I have completed a full upgrade of the Zino flight controller, the gimbal, and the camera firmware. Now it's time to update the Hubsan Zino transmitter and controller. So the drivers are actually included in the HT016B update tools. And we're going to navigate to USB driver. And this is it, the WinUSB new VCOM driver. Now, I've already gone ahead and installed this, so I'm not going to waste your time going through this whole installer. But you just click through this, agree to what it wants you to agree to, and the driver to interface with the controller will be done and installed. So, now to get this controller to talk to the computer, we need to jump the pins. Now, this is a little difficult to see on camera, but the controller has a series of pins underneath it, and it's the very leftmost pins that need to be jumped, the two at the end. Now, you can do this with tweezers, you can do this with tin foil. There's more than one way to jump those. I personally have a little cable that I made, and that cable is here. It is this little JST 1.25 millimeter connector, and you'll find this on a lot of toy quads. And that's it. It just kind of fits in just like that. So now that it's bridged, we can go ahead and plug in the controller. We're going to turn the controller on. Alright, so now let's go to the updater tool. And that's in the HT016B update tools folder. And we're going to click on that. So we're just going to continue. And now we're going to connect to the remote. It says no VCOM port found. Now, if you get this error, check to see that you jumped it. Alright, I've re-secured the jumper. Alright, I think I've got it. I think I've got it now. I don't think I had it plugged in all the way because I was filling it with the camera. But if you get that error, it means you probably didn't jump it right. So as you can see, now it's jumped correctly. And what we need to do is we need to click this little folder icon here. And we need to locate this 970U image. Now, you'll find that 970U image in the firmware folder here, RP V0.1.6. Again, the version is going to be different. So you're going to click Open. And now you've selected this firmware image. And we can go ahead and click Burn. And we're going to pray. And we're going to hope that this works. Okay. And when you see this is going on, it's a good sign that everything's okay. And that's it. It just says burn successfully. Pull the jumper and shut down the remote. And that is it. Alright, I've got the Zino real quick hooked up just so you guys can see the upgrade did go successfully. I've got the Zino camera firmware version I wanted, and I've got the latest Zino flight controller firmware version I wanted. Everything seems to be working. The controller's connected. The gimbal's functioning. I hope you enjoyed the video. I always like to document these things for myself or for anyone else out there who is looking for this kind of information. If you liked the video, please hit that like button, as it really does help my channel out. If you have any questions or comments about the process, please let me know. I'll try to help you out. I'm going to give a shout out to Zino Nation with Ron Brown, Marcus, and all those guys, because I was on the show last night and they gave me some tips on this whole process. It was definitely really helpful. So I'm really glad to be able to make this video for you guys, and I'm going to be testing my Zino out now. I've got the firmware I want with the camera version I want, and I'm pretty happy. Alright, so that's about it. As always, have a great day, guys. I'm going to go do some flying.
Breathe in the air, the light that surrounds me. If we hold ourselves together,